Welcome, everyone, to this webinar brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. In Hebrew, our name is Habitchonistim. IDSF is the leading Israeli organization advocating for strong, strategic, national security-oriented policies. Our movement consists of more than 20,000 people in Israel, primarily reserve officers and operators from all branches of the Israel Defense Establishment, who believe that strong national security priorities and staunch Zionism are necessary for Israel to be the eternal homeland of the Jewish people. Thank you to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning into these war briefings. It is very important to us at IDSF to share with you war updates and analysis from experts here in Israel through these very direct and candid briefings. We are joined today by Dr. Gadi Taub, radio show host, author, political commentator, much more. It's a great pleasure, Gadi, to be able to chat with you right now. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Moshe. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Let's just jump right into it. My first question I'd like to ask you, and by the way, for all of our listeners, I'm going to throw Gadi's podcast, his regular Israel update in English, into the chat so everyone can check it out, and feel free, of course, to subscribe to that. But let's jump right into it. Do you think that the U.S. is slowing down or placing impediments on Israel's war effort?
Absolutely. I think we in Israel have a sentimental view of the United States, and we don't pause to ask what is the strategic outlook of the Biden administration and what's its regional policy. And the regional policy of this administration is a continuation of Obama's regional policy, which my colleague and co-host to the Israel Update show, Mike Duran, along with Tony Badran, Mike from the Hudson Institute and Tony from FDD, have called the realignment. The idea being that the problems in the region stem from the fact that an alliance of pro-Western states have pushed Iran and backed it into a corner. And what we should do is make them stakeholders and allow them to take their proper place on the Middle East stage. This is a progressive view in which resentment of the West is always our fault. It's not because they really hate the West. It's because we did something wrong to them, colonialism, a CIA coup, or something else. So that's the general outlook. And this has not been working because with the exception of the 4 Trump years, for the last almost 2 decades, the United States is helping along the drive of the mullahs from Tehran to regional hegemony. This the nuclear deal, the JCPOA, is part of that, but it's not the only part. And now the Biden administration has released huge sums of money to Tehran. And this is the background of what happened in Hamas, because Hamas is one of Iran's proxies, right? Iran is trying to circle Israel with proxies. So we have Hamas, we have Hezbollah in the north, we now have Syria, Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, and Hamas in the south. And the first thing that I think the Americans thought about is how to prevent this war from collapsing the system of alliance and their policy of appeasement, and how to save that policy from the collateral damage of this war. So the Biden administration first sought to localize this war. This war is trouble for them because it shows that the policy failed, because it shows that their policy emboldened Iran's proxies. So the first thing the administration did, it was very lucky for us because the interest here converged. Is the administration sent an aircraft carrier, right, to the Eastern Mediterranean to deter Hezbollah. This was very good for Israel because our fear was a 2-front war, and that seemed to have a very good chilling effect. But as I said at the time, and Israelis did not want to listen, this aircraft carrier is here to prevent the spread of the war in order to save the appeasement policy. Because if this war spreads to the north, then it would be clear to everyone on the world stage, and especially to American voters, that the policy has failed. Biden has continued to unfreeze Iranian assets from October 7 up to now. They haven't stopped. The appeasement is continuing. So the Israeli interest and the American interest converged for a while, but it's Israel's interest to take out Hezbollah. And it's clear to me. I just this morning spoke with a very prominent expert. I'm not allowed to quote him. It was off the record, who said, "Look, this administration will never let Israel initiate a war with Hezbollah." Now, think, Moshe, about our perspective, our Zionist perspective. We had to evacuate the north of the country because of the threat of Hezbollah. How are we going to repopulate our towns and villages without taking out Hezbollah? Israel, I hope, is waking up from its own conceptions, you say, preconception. I guess, we in Hebrew say conceptia. It's a Yom Kippur term of the intelligence failure, but it's in English, it's preconception. And our whole predisposition, if I may introduce another long word, was ever since perhaps the 70s, defensive, while the original Ben-Gurion conception of security was offensive. You go out and hunt your enemies. You don't build a higher wall and hope that it will defend you. But we've been building iron domes and slurry walls and creating all these mechanisms which are all defensive. And when you have an offensive enemy, in the long run, they have the advantage. And Israel must destroy Hezbollah at some point. And you'll see, America is not going to let us do that. And now Blinken was here, and Blinken sat in on the cabinet meeting, which I find very strange. He did it like the Godfather, as if this is. He can meet with our foreign minister. That's the right protocol. But he came here like. Can you hear me, Moshe?
We lost your video, but I hear you for sure.
Yeah. So my video.
Back.
Okay. So I'm back. So he sat on like the Roman prefect for southern Syria, for the southern Syria region in I don't know, the first century of the first millennium, and he dictated basically limits to the ways we can conduct the war. And if you listen to what he said, avoid civilian casualties, do not bomb UN facilities, while we know that they're hiding their weapons in UNRWA schools and other UN facilities. Do not move populations around. And when, according to leaks, Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant said Israel is united behind crushing Hezbollah and winning this war, even if it takes months, Blinken said you don't have months, you have weeks. And within these limitations, weeks means that we will not be able to win this war. So the United States now, it seems, is eager to end this war before Israel can achieve victory. This means our blood would stain the water for all the bigger sharks to smell.
Wow. Okay, so you're certainly suggesting Israel needs to be on the offensive, more aggressive, and take it to the end. So
yeah, but I'll say more. Sorry for stopping you, because I think, Moshe, we are now back in 1956, and so I'll briefly paint this picture for you. From 1955, when Nasser had this huge arms deal with the Soviets, Israel felt that the radical leader of the Arab world, Gamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt, is creating a ring around us in order to destroy the state of Israel. And it took a few wars: 56, the Suez War, 67, the Six-Day War, the War of Attrition, and then the Yom Kippur War, to finally reach the agreement with Egypt in 1979, 2 decades and a little more than 2 decades, in order to break the encirclement ring. That's how long it took. So now we are in 56, and this is the Suez War. This is just the first phase in what is bound to be a long struggle to release Israel from the noose that Iran is trying to tie around our neck. And this tells you how out of touch Blinken's remarks are. He's talking about weeks, and we need to think about decades. We need to now strategically plan a way to break the noose that is surrounding us, masterminded by Iran, and finally take out Iran's nuclear, military nuclear program. So this is where I think we are. Weeks doesn't even begin to capture it.
So you sat down with Tzvika Moore to discuss the hostage situation. And I think I've heard him speak. He's amazing. And I think he provides a perspective that much of our American audience may not be familiar with, which I think fits into what you're suggesting. Are you able to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I spoke with Tzvika Moore first on the radio, and I was astounded by the moral and spiritual strength of this man. He is the father of Eitan Moore, who is held now by Hamas. And he said to me in the podcast, he said, a few months before Eitan was taken hostage by Hamas, we had a conversation about the Gilad Shalit deal, in which Israel returned about 1,000 terrorists for one soldier hostage. And Eitan, his son, said, "Dad, if I'm ever kidnapped, don't release terrorists for me. Don't release terrorists for me." And now his son is kidnapped. And Tzvika is insisting that we should not go for hostage deals, that we should not, because he said to me, he said, it's not true that there were 240 hostages and now 140. There are 7 million hostages. We Israelis are all hostages of Hamas now, and we need to take Hamas out. We can't run national policy based on the fate of 140 people, while the fate of 7 million people is hanging in the balance. And, you know, everybody thinks so, or at least quietly. But to hear this openly from a father, while all the other parents around him are blinded by pain, and I can't blame them for this. I can't blame them for this. Some of these people say, I will do anything to release my son. And Tzvika said, he asked them, anything? Would you destroy the state of Israel for that? And that gave them pause, but they couldn't quite answer it. Because for some people, you know, I would give my life, I would give everybody's life to save my son. That's the natural emotion. But hopefully, natural emotion is restrained by culture. It is restrained by rationality. It is restrained by moral responsibility and moral training. And it is restrained by the collective moral fiber of a people. And now we are less than a week away from Hanukkah. And it's time to abandon when I started studying the United States, my PhD is in American history. I read this book by cultural critic Philip Rieff. And Philip Rieff wrote a book called The Culture of the Therapeutic, in which we attend to everyone's inner needs, and we listen to every, he didn't use the word trigger, but he referred to the same phenomena, and we just assume that we can create a safe space for everybody to live in and never be offended and all that. And we should we should turn our backs on this and look back at the Maccabees, where Matityahu told his relatives, "You come to me crying about one of my sons being killed, but the fate of a nation," I'm paraphrasing, "the fate of a nation is hanging in the balance." And this is what we need to focus on. So we need the spirit of the Maccabees, who were admittedly fanatics, but when you have to face someone like Hezbollah, a force like Hezbollah with absolutely no moral scruples, you need to be tough. So Tzvika said to me, "Look, we're saying bring them back, bring them back." There's a whole campaign all over Israel. He said, "If I even buy a used electric scooter, I don't let the other side know how much I want it, let alone when we are fighting for the lives of our sons." And here we are with a campaign. This is a campaign of the left designed to weaken the government because it's part of a plan. These people, you have to understand that when they say that Netanyahu is a worse enemy than Iran, they mean it. Their skewed vision of the world is clouded by hatred for Netanyahu, which is irrational. It's like the never Trumpers. It's like it blinds their eyes. They go mad with anger. And so for many of them, Hamas is an opportunity to get rid of Netanyahu. I'm almost quoting Haaretz here, which I hope will suffer economically from this crisis, because we all saw that this is one of the most effective anti-Israeli propaganda machines worldwide, perhaps more useful to anti-Semites even than the UN. So when we are faced with that kind of conspiratorial thinking, that Netanyahu is the devil incarnate, their calculation is we can use the hostage issue in order to prevent Israel from complete victory, which will cause Netanyahu to fall. And if you think this is too cynical for these people, you are wrong, because one of their ringleaders was there organizing the parents of the hostages in the afternoon of October 7. That early, he had a plan how to topple the government.
Gadi, I have a really important question I want to ask you based on something you spoke about this morning on your radio show. But before I do that, we do have Brigadier General Amir Avivi here with us. So I'm going to go to General Avivi, and I want to come back to you for this important question. General Avivi, are you able to share a little bit of an update of what is happening right now in Gaza?
Actually, I want to ask Gadi a question.
Yeah, please do, Amir.
Yeah. First, Gadi, you talked about the Maccabees. I think that the Bitchonistim are,
the new Maccabees,
really aligned with Maccabees values. You talked about Biden's policy, and you compared it to Obama's. But in the last few months, we saw a change. We saw this administration completely changing its policy from looking at Saudi Arabia really in detest, I would say, really detesting this country as an opportunity to build an alliance, an American-Israeli Sunni alliance that can counter this rising Iranian, Russian, possibly Chinese front. And also this war, America, it's Biden saying, right, saying, don't intervene, not Iran and not Hezbollah.
Yeah.
So we're seeing some kind of change. To understand how you view this change of policy. Why is it happening? What's exactly this change? And does it give us any opportunities looking at the day after Hamas, providing, of course, that we actually destroy Hamas?
Yep. Well, that's a very interesting question, and I'm not sure I have a complete answer. Because I think that the American policy has internal contradictions. But I would point out the fact that Biden keeps unfreezing funds for the Iranians as we speak. So my interpretation is that the concern of the Biden administration is a total collapse of their Middle East policy in a war. So what it seeks to prevent is a war with Iran, because if there's an Israeli-Iranian war, the United States will be dragged into it, and it would have to defend Israel in one way or the other. So their policy is trying to balance their appeasement towards Iran. And note, Amir, Iran keeps attacking them, and they barely answer. There have been more than 50 attacks on American forces in Iraq and Syria.
I think this week this week we saw in Kirkuk, we saw one bigger attack. But you are right overall, yeah.
They keep at it, and the Biden administration keeps unfreezing funds, and so there are convergences between Israeli policy and American policy, but the larger policy is not strayed so far from Obama's policy, and the people running it are Obama personnel, and so this fits very well with Blinken coming here and basically telling us, Amir, correct me if I'm wrong, basically laying out limits that would not let us win this war. If we abide by the restriction Blinken suggests, then we can take out Hamas, can we?
Yeah, I think that you're right. I'm not sure they're completely saying don't move at all society. They're definitely under a lot of pressure talking about humanitarian issues. I mean, you know, this is elections year. I mean, it's obvious that there is a lot of pressure on Biden when it comes to the Palestinian society in Gaza. And this is really a question how strongly the cabinet can stand. And, you know, at the end of the day, for us, really, as you said, this is an existential war. If we don't win against Hamas, we'll be attacked from all over.
Yeah, and so I completely agree. We have to stand firm on this. And I'd also recommend to your listeners to look at what I think is the most brilliant piece written on this, explaining the American policy. It's a piece called The Realignment, written by my colleague Mike Duran. And if you want to follow the vicissitudes of American policy, we discuss this twice a week on our show on Rumble called Israel Update, and Moshe will send you the link, because Mike has been saying this for about a decade, and people have been saying, nah, come on, that can't be. And he has been proven right. He has been proven right on most points. So I sincerely recommend.
Gadi, I want to ask you another question.
Sure.
I mean, we see when Biden came to Israel, he was really bothered about world trade, the crisis of, goods not arriving to the US and so on. And then he started talking about this new route from India to UAE and through Saudi Arabia, Jordan to Israel. He talked about it again in the G20 when he started pushing the peace agreement with Saudi Arabia. And now we see these attacks by the Houthis, of course, directed by Iran. We see world trade being affected. See a British ship attacked. And how much do you think it might affect the overall view of the US and the West? I mean, of what Iran really is and what kind of threats they impose to world trade, to the West overall, and their aspiration to hegemony in our region and maybe far beyond. You know, we see them in Morocco.
So Amir, they're basically. I think there are basically two clocks running here, and the Israeli clock, we face existential danger, and the American clock, when will America wake up to the collapse or the failure of their regional policy? Then there's the first clock on when will Europe or the West in general wake up to the threat of radical Islam. And these clocks are not necessarily synchronized, but if we should do our best to help the United States wake up to. And here, I think there's room for maneuver, because while the administration is very progressive and thinks of Iran in these terms I described, the American public decidedly sides with Israel over Iran. Americans don't like the mullahs from Iran, and they are partial to Israel. So the question is, do we have any wiggle room if we start making louder noises? Like, for instance, saying explicitly that Biden's administration is going to save Hamas from destruction. And I think that would not be very popular with the American public. So I'm asking myself, is there a way that we could do it without a full break with the Democratic administration? And I think
But don't
there
you
are
think
ways.
that the administration wants Hamas destroyed, not for the reasons we want them destroyed? They want Hamas destroyed because they see them as a hurdle on the way to a two-state solution.
Right, but I'm beginning to think that they are, because Biden said at one time, he said the radicals of Hamas about something, as if there are, Hamas radicals and Hamas moderates. So I think that as this war is getting progressively difficult to defend for the left wing of their constituency, they are losing patience. And I think they're slowly moving to some idea of a weakened Hamas, which they may imagine would accept the authority of the Palestinian Authority. But progressives don't understand fanaticism, because for all of their talk of diversity, they at their hearts of hearts believe that everyone is fundamentally like them. So this is why Barack Obama said that, in the end, the Palestinians, they are like us. They want their children to grow up with no threats. They want to come home in the evening. They want to make a living and have food on the table. And we accepted this, and our, all your former colleagues in the, I'm sorry, very unimpressive. They're not like you, Amir. They haven't looked at reality afresh, and they also thought that Hamas is deterred. Why is Hamas deterred? Because, as our chief of intelligence said, General Aaron Khalifa, he said the Hamas will not give up the economic advantages of the Hudna, of the long ceasefire, and so they are deterred. And this was the misconception, because we don't listen to them, as the Americans don't listen to the mullahs in Tehran, who mean what they say. When they say death to America, this is not propaganda. This is their actual wish.
Right. So maybe I'll give one important update. As we know, one of the main strongholds of Hamas in the northern part of Gaza is Jabalia. Many of the terrorists that fought in the different parts while the IDF was taking over the north, they retreated to Jabalia camp. And the IDF announced that it started its offensive attack with Division 162 on Jabalia. So this will probably be a very tough fight, because it's a real stronghold. We've seen massive Air Force attacks and artillery in the last 2 days in this area, and also in the area of Khan Yunis in the south. So it seems that the IDF is preparing to its ground incursion also into the heart of Khan Yunis. So as far as the IDF and our government, it seems that we're resolute to really achieve the goals of war and destroy Hamas. But of course, as Gadi said, it's not at all weeks as maybe people would wish. It's many months and possibly years afterwards to really stabilize this place and destroy and dismantle all the terror infrastructure that we are finding there. That is unbelievable. It's really on a massive scale, and requires a lot of time to deal with. Moshe, you want one last question before we wrap it up?
There are so many questions that are coming in. Our viewers are very much intrigued by this conversation. Gadi, thank you so much for joining us. Gadi, I told you there was a question I had. We have no time for it. So I'm going to ask you, you'll give me one sentence leader, and then people are going to have to tune into your own podcast for the fuller discussion, which is something you spoke about this morning in terms of the growth of intolerance and anti-Semitism on university campuses in America, which is a very important issue to many of our viewers. Can you give one sentence, a teaser of what you think about that? And then we'll refer everyone to your podcast for more.
Okay, I just saw someone asked about the article I referred to. It's called The Realignment by Mike Duran and Tony Badran, and it's on the Tablet magazine. 25 years ago, I wrote a book about the rise of the beginning of postmodern influence in academia, and I said it was a disaster. The book became a bestseller, but the general criticism was, what are you talking about? Why do we have to listen to these anti-Western crazies at the margins of some academic department? And lo and behold, they've conquered academia. And I'm glad that Jews in America are beginning to wake up. People who contributed money to Harvard University suddenly see that their Jewish kids can't go to safely on campus there. So I think that is a major struggle. And you're right. We'll have to discuss this on our podcast too. And I'll inform Mike Duran that we have to.
Thank you so much, Brigadier General Avivi. Thank you so much, Gadi Taub.
So Moshe, people are asking, well, people have many questions, and we're going to do a whole session this week on Thursday, just questions. We're going to answer questions on Thursday, and we'll dedicate the whole time for answering questions as we did last week. We took one day and really focused on questions.
Right, the rapid fire question session. So everyone get your questions ready for Thursday. We're going to just charge through them. Thank you so much to all of our viewers for tuning in. Thank you to our presenters. Stay safe, everyone. Stay strong. Take care.
Thank you, Moshe. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.